Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. I'm Troy. So many of us that homestead would like to find a way to generate extra income from the homestead so we can either build up a nest egg of money to expand our homestead operations or to eventually put away the 9 to 5 and homestead exclusively. So this is part 2 in a series of videos that I'm creating on ideas for generating income on the homestead. And the chickens always start up when I get the camera fired up. Shut up! Well, let's dive into this. So idea number 2 and the subject of this video is plant propagation. And that's just a fancy word for generating larger numbers of a certain plant species. But the value in propagating plants is it allows your customers, people you're going to sell these plants to kind of skip ahead. So it removes the burden and the strain and the task of trying to start something from seed or propagating it on their own. So you're kind of doing that legwork in front. And it may also give them the opportunity to access varieties that they can't get at box stores or regular nurseries. So for most of us, when it comes to the topic of selling plants, you automatically think of, well, tomato plants or pepper plants or those type of things that you see all the time this time of year that people are selling for low expense. You know, like a tomato plant, you get a flat of 6 for $4 or whatever the case may be. But with propagation of plants, there's really a main fork in the road, and that is, do you look at annuals or do you look at perennials? And I'm going to make the argument that you should look at perennials because I think there's more value in those. So with annuals like tomatoes, pepper plants, certain lettuces, what do we got here? We got broccoli, all of those things that you can get started from seed and sell as small plants. You may have more demand for those, but that demand is extremely seasonal, and you have to deal in a lot of volume to make that worthwhile. Because if you're just selling a small handful of pepper plants at $4 a tray, then the juice is hardly worth the squeeze in that situation. But with perennials, you deal in a longer term plant, so the value per plant can go up, and you've got a much larger season because perennials can be added throughout the growing season and even some in the dormant season. So let's get super practical and talk real numbers here. So the first plant I'm recommending is elderberry. It is a great perennial, and if you do any research and you know anything about elderberry, it's really becoming more and more popular. People are seeing the value of it for more than just the fruit of the berries to be made into jellies or jams or those type of things. I'm not going to get into a full discussion about elderberry. We've actually talked about it on other videos. But the neat thing about elderberries is it's super easy to propagate. And when you look on web stores like Etsy or even Stark Brothers, those types, elderberries are not inexpensive. They're selling for about $15 a start. And what's really interesting, so this bush of elderberries, this is actually in what was supposed to be my little propagation garden, where I would put some starts in and then transplant them. Well, it did so well in this soil that we've built up in this little raised bed that they had massive roots when it came time for me to dig them up and transplant. So this whole section came from one bush that I found alongside the highway regionally. So it's just one of those deals, hey, there's a bush, stop and get a cutting off of it, and then start putting all those cuttings in the ground in the wintertime. And now it's come to this. So this has become the parent plant for our property. And there's a couple other cultivars that I've purchased that parent plants as well. But this is the primary one because it just thrives here in West Virginia in our soil. So last year I took cuttings from that parent plant and put 3 of those small cuttings right here. So there's 3 plants, and you can see how tall those have become. And then they've actually started new shoots right here. Here's one here, one here. Here's one leftover pot that I didn't get to transplant, so it died. So there's going to be some loss, but man, they are taking off like crazy. And so these can obviously become new parent plants, but these are going to start producing fruit soon. There's already flower buds on it. So this winter, I cut back the parent plant really hard. I cut about 3/4 of it out, and you can see how much it's recovered from that. So let me show you what I've got ready now. So right here in these little trays, and I get these trays pretty inexpensively. I think I get them $1 a piece from a local guy. There are elderberry starts, 1, 2, 3, 4 trays, and I believe there's about 50 to 80 elderberry starts in each tray. And they're thriving already. And the reason why I put them in these little trays is I drilled holes in them because I didn't want to recreate what I did over there where when it came time to transplant that I couldn't just easily lift them up. Make sure it didn't make a liar out of me that there's roots sticking out of the bottom. But I can take this and of course just easily dump the dirt out and produce bare root and transplant, or I can pot them up for sale. Here's one that's already potted up. And if you imagine, if we could sell every single one of these for $5 an elderberry plant, and there's 4 trays, let's say with just 50, that's 200 plants, that's $1,000 just an elderberry. And there's a big asterisk by that, and we'll get to that in a second. But as far as coming up with the plants to propagate, that's not the problem. So an elderberry is a good place to start. So another great plant to start with in your propagation journey is comfrey. And that's what you see all along our garden fence here is comfrey. There's more elderberry in the back. But comfrey, everything you see here, there's some over here, there's some down at my greenhouse. Where else do I have some? There's some up at our fruit trees. There's some in the front yard landscaping. So anywhere there's comfrey, it came from one purchase about 5 years ago, $14 worth of root cuttings. And that's the beauty of comfrey, that it propagates really easy. So I could dig up this one comfrey plant here, or even dig up just half of it. It's going to thrive still. And I can take the root cuttings. In a 1-inch section of root cuttings right now, as I do the research, that is 5 to 10 cuttings in a bag is selling for about $15. This one plant here could produce, I don't know, maybe 100 or 200 root cuttings just from this one plant. And it still would make it back. It's not going to kill the plant. So there's opportunities to sell just root cuttings. Or if you want to value add, you take that root cutting, put it in a pot to transplant, and then get a crown started. So once you've got green leaves popping up, you've got a crown. And those are selling for $15 to $25 just standalone. So one root cutting making one plant, $15 to $25 right there. So another plant that propagates really well around here is the wineberry. And this is considered an invasive. You look at it, you think, well, that's just a red raspberry. But it produces a much, much sweeter berry than a red raspberry or black raspberry. And this is a parent plant that my nephew actually got for me. Thank you, Aiden. And so we planted it here in the raised bed. It's doing really well. But anywhere the cane touches the ground, of course, it can reestablish roots. So this cane has started a new plant here. This cane has started a new plant here. One cane actually died out, but it's got a plant started there. One cane the chickens dug up, so I reburied it, so it should start new canes. Same here. Here's a new one. Here's a new one. There's a new one. Here's a new one. There's a new one right over here. So just one parent plant, we're producing multiple child plants that we can dig up, move around, and do the exact same thing. And if you look at wineberry, it's kind of hard to find because some people see it as an invasive and don't want you messing with it. But the ones that are selling it, they're selling it $25 to $35 a plant. So I could dig each one of these up and you'd be looking at a $25 to $35 opportunity there. You know, and it's the same with even tame cultivars. So here's a red raspberry that I purchased from a box store, and it's doing so well here below the chicken church runoff that it's already got a bunch of starts on it. And this plant's not even a year old yet. Just coming up on a year, actually. So even here's an example of Arapaho blackberry that I've transplanted. And it's doing great, recovering from the transplant. So this is my first test with transplanting this tame variety. So now I'm seeing, okay, here's yet another opportunity. Plant a little comfrey around it too to keep the weeds down and provide some nutrient as well. So along the same subject of berries, then you even have strawberries. This is the ever-bearing berry variety. And these came from a couple transplants that my friends gave us, Matt and Heather. Thanks, Matt and Heather, for that. And what they did is, of course, as you know, strawberries spread, so they just cleaned out their bed to keep the population from being too dense, gave us those starts, and we had them over there in our raised bed, and they propagated so well that I came through this spring and dug up. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 by Kelly's Kale, 16, 17, yeah, so 18 strawberry plants. Still have some back in the bed. So 18 strawberry plants from a handful of starts from our friends, and they're already starting to produce berries. There's some green ones on this one right here. So you look at that opportunity and say, wow, ever-bearing strawberries that are going to come back each year, they're going to spread and they're going to create more. You can make money in the abundance of your strawberries doing well on your own homestead. These strawberry starts go anywhere from $5 to $10 a piece, depending on the variety and the location. So one that's really been exciting for me this year is propagating wild plum from seed. And this is my first foray into doing this. This one's taking off like crazy. It's got roots coming out of the bottom. And I have one wild plum tree on the property here. It's self-pollinating, and it would produce tons of these plums, and the pigs just absolutely love them, and it makes some of the best jelly you can imagine. So with a little research, I learned how to take the pit and be able to propagate it. So this spring I planted 40-some plum tree starts, and with a germination rate of, my goodness, almost 90-some%. And I've given away a lot of these potted up trees to friends and family for them to enjoy. So depending on your area and what you have to deal with, you can get away from human food perennials to propagate and get into hardwood or deciduous trees and shrubs. So for example, here's a locust tree, and it looks like it's dead, but it's actually just now starting to bud out. And some people think locust is a scourge, but it's a great fodder tree. It's something that can be coppiced really far back and still come back. When they get big enough, they make incredible fence posts. And the leaves, the non-thorny leaves, pigs absolutely love. And I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, and most people in southern Appalachia is going to want to throw something at me, but you've even got autumn olive. People up north, it's my understanding, like autumn olive and even sell it. Again, is another good fodder tree, but even the fruit is edible. There's not a lot of fruit to go with that stone. But a lot of people produce jellies and jams from the autumn olives, and their fruit is actually pretty tasty. When I'm just looking around here on the ground, I see some starts, like here's a beech tree start. There's a little red maple. What else am I seeing? I know there's an oak here somewhere. Yep, there's a little white oak. Here's a black raspberry, wild raspberry. So there's a lot of plants that we just find occurring naturally in our area that people may want. I had one of you viewers ask me to ship them some sycamore starts. And I won't get into the reasons why that's not really a good option, but there's just things that we take for granted around here that a lot of people want. And if you can produce those either from transplanting or digging up a transplant or starting something from seed, then you now have a viable product that could be worth some money to someone. So you can also get into the herbs or medicinals, those that are perennial. Like we have yarrow, we have echinacea. Let's see, I think Kelly also has some lavender, rosemary. So there's quite a few things there, smaller plants that you can get started. And those people love for their small herb gardens or their window boxes, those type of things. So those can have some great value to them. Ooh, you're cluttering up the video area there, dog. Retriever, he's going to bring it back. So before you go hog wild and say, yes, we're going to go full in on perennials, we're going to propagate, we're going to sell everything we've got to be able to do this, let's talk about some of the challenges. The first challenge, of course, is the knowledge in how to propagate those plants in the first place. So it took me a while to figure out how to do the plums, had to do some research, and there was some time involved in that. Well, the obvious challenge, of course, is finding the plant to propagate in the first place. So we were blessed enough to have a wild plum already on the property, and of course we've got tons of hardwoods, but thanks to friends and thanks to just looking around for things, we were able to find the elderberry and the strawberry and some of the blackberry. But some of the things we just had to purchase and let it mature to the point that we could take from it without killing it, so it could serve as the parent plant. Well, I think the biggest challenge is just finding customers. And that's the challenge with anything. So pointed out, I have 200 elderberry starts. Can I actually sell 200 elderberry starts? Do I have enough of a customer base? And my recommendation for that is to start local first. So whether it's a roadside stand, your local flea market, farmer's market, something like that, friends, family, church, civic units, anything like that that you can start and have a plant that you can put in somebody's hand so they can see it, then maybe that's where you start. And then migrate to possibly doing online sales. But if you're going to do online, make sure you understand the shipping. A, the states that you can't ship certain things to. B, how to ship something so it stays alive. If you're going to do bare root, if you're going to try to do it in a pot All of those things add to an experience and knowledge that you need to be able to make a successful business. So be sure to do all your research on that. And another challenge is just educating the customer that they actually need this plant. So for the example of wild plum, when you tell people, hey, you want a wild plum tree, why? Well, it's going to produce a fruit that's about the size of a marble that's primarily going to be pit, and it's really going to be kind of tough to eat, and it's a little sour. You're like, well, why would I want that? And then you have to explain the fodder benefits, the benefits for pollinators, and then of course the great juice that comes from it, so you can produce any byproduct that utilizes the juice more so than the flesh. And the same with comfrey and yarrow and all these other things that people don't fully understand why they would need it and what the benefit of having that in their garden would be. And of course the challenge with pricing. You have to figure out, what am I going to charge for these plants? How do I make sure I cover my costs? Is it worth my time? And how do I make sure I don't price it too high that I lose a lot of customers? So you got to navigate all of that to figure out exactly how this side hustle is going to work for you. So if you've got a green thumb and you've got the resources to be able to start a lot of these parent plants, I consider looking at plant propagation as an additional income stream for your homestead. It really requires very little input, so you don't have this huge investment up front. It's more of just an investment of time and making sure you develop a customer base that wants the product you're raising. Well, comment below. Let me know what successes you all have had with plant propagation and what you think would be the most popular. The ones that I listed were just a sample of what we're doing here, so there's thousands of other opportunities out there as well. Well, stay tuned. We're going to continue with this playlist in the near future. We've got some other ideas coming up. And don't forget to join our email newsletter where we talk about these things a little bit more in depth and share some more of our experiences and our ideas as we move forward. All right, well, I appreciate everybody watching. Take care.